At a restaurant, you know. And he was always in the kitchen. He lived in the kitchen. He slept next to the kitchen. He was completely in the kitchen. So he liked this cooking of prasadam so much that even he worked half day cooking like mad. He spent the whole afternoon just watching people how they are eating. You know, he really liked that. And there was already some effect in this. Some of the people took it. Not only that, but he liked to serve. And he was serving, the restaurant doubled the income. Because he was just lecturing to what he was cooking. And, you know, the chief is cooking, you know. Yeah. So he was like, wow, and look at this. And this is very special. And this is scones. And, you know, and he was completely, and people were just so excited just by listening to him. Even actually the prasadam was terrible. And then, you know, half a year down the line, it started to get eatable. There was less of this hardu button, you know. Yeah. And then 1 year it was already quite okay. You know. I heard recently he's still a cook in a restaurant in Radhanesh. He's the chief.
Radhanesh?
Yeah. So, you know, so he became actually a very nice cook. Simply because of these two qualifications, serious and sincere. And preaching oriented. They have to get prasadam. When you really think like this, you can cook up some, you know, but I could cook. I could cook liquid halwa, it's called managrin. You know, managrin with milk, I can cook that, yeah. Sugar, you know, you throw in some raisins. And then, you know, then you have basically kind of liquid halwa, you know, that I can cook, yeah. And then you put maybe some cinnamon in it, something like this, yeah, that's actually good. Butter. I could cook up something like this. I used to cook for a whole bhakta party on traveling Sankirtan. There was no other choice. So, another preparation I can make is called spaghetti. I can cook that. In the beginning I messed up even that. I cooked it too long and it was a spaghetti managrin. It was just mushed up something which you cannot just even distinguish that it used to be spaghetti. I just cooked it in, you know, into a mush. So I learned, you know, a little bit to time it in a proper way so it ends up looking like spaghetti. So this is how much of my cooking goes. But the bhaktas love that. If you were eating spaghetti the whole week, you know. And then we added a few things more. Not exactly. Nowadays you can't even mention it. But the whole Sankirtan party was very happy because that was not in a temple. Temple you never got such a preparation. Spaghetti with soya chunks and ketchup. Wow! That was the real thing. It looked almost non-vegetarian and it tasted almost non-vegetarian. So they liked that. It was like, you know, yeah, it's like in good old days, spaghetti, soya meat and ketchup. And I surrendered, okay, he said, you want to really eat this stuff? Yeah! In huge pots of this, you know, and they were just eating lots of it. You know, and then they're going on Sankirtan. But they don't do this nowadays. Yeah. This is a long time ago. Well, those days, devotees running on the streets, they did all kinds of things. I was asking once my Gopal, what did you eat in America? He said, well, just in America, just buy some frozen stuff and just slam it in a pot and melt it and just put some butter. And then he said, and then honey, must be honey. You buy a jar with liquid honey, acacia, and then you drink half a liter honey before you go out on the street. Don't do that. It's pure speed. He said, well, why did you do that? This is madness. He said, yeah, it was completely mad. We were running in the subway, they distributed in the subways down there in this hell. Just in full of this liquid honey. It's like, you know, it's like condensed sugar and it's just pure lust kind of. And they just, you know, this is like intoxication. Yeah. It's read this about Balaram and Baruni drink. Yeah, that's a real thing. Balaram was also drunk, so we thought, yeah, the best servants of Balaram, half a liter milk, you know, honey, and then just out. madness. This is what you do when you are young. This is not our standards today, definitely not. We try to get more high on knowledge, not on liquid honey, Those days not many devotees actually knew much. They just read Krishna book, and Balaram, honey, Balaram was drunk. What? Liquid honey. Well, that's not alcohol. Who said, well, we have alcohol, we are not breaking any principles. It's just a question of doses, how much? That's not written. It's not never stated how much honey is forbidden or allowed to drink in Krishna consciousness. This is nowhere stated, right? There's no principle on that. Who said that? There's no how many deciliter of honey you are allowed to drink. So let's get half a liter, and just Haribol, So
how long can you sustain that?
Huh?
How long can you sustain
it evaporates quite fast. For sure. It's a sugar impact. So, because this liquid goes into the blood right away. So it's just like, la la, and then what?
And then you're hungover for 2 days.
Yeah, no, not really. There's no hangover really, but it just evaporates. It's definitely temporary. And that was realized. So if you want to stay inspired, in Krishna consciousness, don't base it on honey, base it on knowledge. That keeps you a little bit more longer time going, So that was also realized later on, that actually to stay inspired in Krishna consciousness takes a little bit more endeavor, it's more difficult, but it lasts longer. The cheap things always come fast, and they always come easy. The good things, they never come easy. That's what is called tapodivyam. First tapasya, then knowledge. This was actually, when you follow Prabhupada's letters, it's so obvious how the hippies got initiated, everybody was excited, wonderful, preaching picked up, everybody got married, had a wife, we were preaching together, Prabhupada ki jai. If you look at these old pictures, we have this here, I have not so bona fide, brochure, this, chant Hare Krishna, on chanting Hare Krishna or whatever, that. And this is actually photos inside from the original publication of that leaflet, of that little pamphlet. You look at the pictures and the photos of these devotees. Everybody's just bright, laughing and completely fired up. This is not just staged, this was really like that. Devotees picked up Krishna consciousness, everybody was so excited. Yeah, but 2-3 years down the line, it dawned upon everybody, hey, this is serious. This requires, as we just read, sincerity and, seriousness. And then it shows. My Bhakta Guru Bhakti Bhushan Maharaj used to say, in the beginning everybody is good, Yeah? You come and shine, and after some years you don't shine so much. Why? Well, because the real nature of Krishna consciousness becomes evident. First comes the tapasya. And tapasya is just to abstain. The biggest tapasya is not to do what you want to do. That's really tapasya. Actually, the fight is on the level of desire. And desire affects the thinking, and desire affects the feeling. So, but the real problem is the desire. As Prabhupada writes, a yogi may go through thousands of years of tapasya, achieve all kinds of mystic powers, so austere, but at the end it becomes evident the last desire left is, I want to become God. And how easy it is to think like this when you can create another universe and things like that. You start to think, look, I became God. Prabhupada said that statement in itself is false. Because God doesn't become God. God is God. He doesn't have to become anything. He's Atmarama, completely self-satisfied. So the fact that you have to struggle to become something is already a proof that you are not God. This is a challenge to all these people who just say, I just achieve all the spiritual knowledge just by progressing and walking and watching and, this empiric style of process. Of all the empiric style of process, Prabhupada said it can bring you to the point that you start to understand you are not this body. That much you can do by empiric, by research, by analytical studies. You can actually come to understand you are not this body. But then that's where it stops. Anything further requires a descending mercy. Even that empiric thing we understand strictly spoken is also depending on mercy, because what are you actually researching with? With the intelligence, with the mind, with the body? Well, that was given to you. So you are always depending on mercy. But this is like the difference between karma yoga and bhakti yoga. Karma yoga means you work with the consciousness, I work, I produce this result, and now I'm surrendering the result to Krishna. It's called karma yoga. But bhakti yoga means there's only one difference between karma yoga and bhakti yoga. That in bhakti yoga, you know already from the beginning that it is not, your achievement to work for Krishna. It's all facilitated by him. This is the difference. Otherwise it looks very similar. Both yogis are surrendering the results to Krishna. But one is thinking that actually I did it and now I surrender. And the other one thinks, no, I'm just surrendering whatever it was all yours. Well, my only surrender is the desire, that's all. And that's where the real problem is. The battle is on the level of desires. You can see how Prabhupada, through all his letters, try to monitor and just to control these desires of these disciples all the time coming up. I want to do this, I want to go over there, I want to do this and like this and this and that. And obviously they were not even sometimes communicating with him, they did their own switches and turns. Prabhupada was especially disturbed and he entrusted the devotee with some project or something like this, and he found out he left. He did this and he did that, and it was amazing. 1971, how Prabhupada, I don't know the number, but could have been already 2,000-3,000 people moving around. And how Prabhupada personally kept track of them, it's just shocking. He doesn't write even to few main managers. He writes to them also, but in the letter you find, but last time, this devotee was Pujari, now you write that he is here, what happened, why he switched his service? Prabhupada was constantly in detail aware, where is everybody, what is he doing, what his services of these devotees are. I mean, it's such a detailed memories. It's just known from those who came close to Prabhupada that Prabhupada never forgot anybody. Even he left, the devotee left. For years sometimes, 3-4 years he was gone. Prabhupada never gave up, never forgotten the service. Sometimes in a shocking way, the gentleman came back from the material world, just completely hair and beard, and devotees are going, oh no, he is coming, or, old temple president or whoever, Prabhupada said, very nice, he came. Can I speak to him? They brought him, they were going, oh no, now Prabhupada will take the clap on him, and this. Prabhupada looked at him and you know what he said? You were such a nice cook, can you cook for me again? And he was like, wow. He didn't chant already for 1-2 years, And he was like, you mean I could again just go in the kitchen and cook for Prabhupada? It was very nice. When you cook, can you cook for me again? And go, yes. And then you suddenly had this hairy guy with a beard in the kitchen cooking, I think that he would have going like, oh! But when Prabhupada arranged such a thing, nobody could object. So Prabhupada picked up that service. Sometimes, his encouragement and confidence was so, powerful that he brought the devotee back on track again. Because when you said, and he's trusting me like this, he's putting such a faith in me, how can I let him down? It's a real science to put in faith in people, because The material energy is not encouraging that. The material energy is just letting us all fall in. We actually are constantly falling down. Material energy means like we are all constantly on the way down. And Prabhupada was treating us like we are all constantly on the way up. With such a confidence that you said, well, I cannot fall down like this. You know, he's trusting me so much. So when he tells me, you are a devotee, you will be a preacher. So I have to act like a devotee and I have to preach. So we were all maintained by Prabhupada's confidence. The only time that process didn't work, when the devotee started making an advertisement and started to declare his state, which was basically fallen, as being the ultimate one. In other words, he didn't want Prabhupada to actually lift him up. He wanted to show Prabhupada that he would have lifted up himself. Then Prabhupada was very happy. But otherwise, weakness and this kind of things, Prabhupada was so encouraging. I mean, I saw it myself a little bit of this when he was around. You wouldn't believe how people were changing. You know, then I got brothers of mine, I don't want to mention names, they're still alive actually. But especially one I remember, nobody could work with him. Nobody. There were constantly letters sent to Prabhupada. You know, he was here. Prabhupada giving you the science. You know, it was like, I could tell you stories. If only half of the stories I had are true, it's hilarious. You could make a movie out of it, a really bizarre movie. It didn't cross even your mind to have such ideas that you could do for Krishna. His whole attitude of preaching was based on the simple thing. Prabhupada is the only pure devotee on this planet. Everything is to be surrendered to him. And the rest is just decoration. It's just basically, you know, material you have to work with. And that was actually his attitude towards devotees, and what to speak of the karmas. I mean, you know. And he was especially good in collecting money. Lots of money. You know. So temple presidents were flipping. Those days it was like, you preach, and then the bhaktas are joining, then they become brahmacharis, and then comes our dear Swami. He had a truck, one of these huge trucks, you know, this American thing, with this huge, with a trailer. This was actually a trailer behind. There was a whole template. And he had one policy in his preaching. Nothing was legal. In principle. Nothing. There was nothing was legal. You know, like, even to fill up the gas in the tank, in the truck, you couldn't do it legally. And he trained like this 20 brahmacharis, they were there. I don't know, I didn't have anything about bank robberies, but it was quite similar. Like, how do you put a truck full of this huge tank, you know? How do you fill up the truck with a petrol? Well, you send one brahmachari to the gas station with a map. And he goes to the man on the cashier, you know, and he goes, excuse me, we got lost here, could you show us the way, please? And he unfolds the map, really big, so the man cannot look out of the window. In the meanwhile, the brahmachari just fills up the tank, you know, and he explains, and they cannot understand. Can you repeat to me, we are lost here, where should we with the map, you know? And by the time he hears outside this, Haribol, he goes, oh, thank you for that. He rolls the map together and boom, he goes the truck fully tanked for free. That was just a little detail. There's millions of stories like this coming up. People just like complaining all the time. There's one lecture Prabhupada, he said, our Maharaj gave me a very nice watch. It's standing on my table. It shows all the time in the whole world simultaneously. And you can hear devotees in the back laughing, you know. And I played the tape back and I think, why are they laughing about the watch? And I realized, oh yeah, of course. They were all laughing because they knew guarantee that watch was stolen. You know, and everybody knew. The Prabhupada took it so bad, and they wrote to Prabhupada, this man is a living gangster. I mean, it's unbelievable. Prabhupada wrote, no, this is not very good what he is doing. But he gives all the money to me. And that was 100% truth. So Prabhupada took that risk while spreading Krishna consciousness to deal with devotees of this caliber. It's interesting is when he left, this Goddard of mine continued in the same track. And he was caught in an airport with a suitcase full of drugs and went to jail for at least 6 years. He was sitting in jail or something like that. Immediately. And Prabhupada wasn't here. So we should never take such a thing as being standard or for granted that we can do. Because when you follow Prabhupada letters, he's actually stressing quite a lot that we should stay as legal as possible. Even we cannot be always. You deal with cheaters, what can you do? I can give other examples. Devotees in France, going, enough of this cheating, enough of this strange things, financial transactions, and there was lots of money those days flying around, So they asked the government, please come, audit us, monitor us. We want to be completely transparent. And the French government went in, checked everything out, and gave devotees hell on earth. Practically finished off the movement, almost. Because you cannot go to demons like this. But Prabhupada said we should also not provoke the demons by unnecessary, really unnecessary stuff. My God, what we did unnecessarily. I never was, fortunately, as a manager, actively involved with such things. But, unnecessary, legal risks in a name of preaching. Why to do that if you don't have to do this? Like here in Denmark, it's so obvious that we can still obviously preach under quite clear legal circumstances. Now, if they will go for your throat, well, maybe we cannot do so anymore. We have to go underground and do things. We will preach one way or another. Nobody can stop the Hare Krishna movement. But if they don't, then why should we do that? The karmas and the demons, why should we do this? So this is Prabhupada actually stressed very much. You have to exhaust all the legal possibilities to establish Krishna consciousness. But when it comes to work in Australia in the early days, as soon as you were chanting on the street, they put you in jail. Prabhupada proudly announced while traveling around the world, all my disciples in Australia are sitting in jail. He made it like a public announcement when he's preaching to them. You can hear it in the lectures when you listen, chronologically when you follow. And he said, and I told them, keep on chanting, never stop chanting, And in Australia it looked really dangerous, All devotees locked up all the time. Until one bishop, even Christian, he stood up and he said, what are you doing? These people, they are not Christians, I know. But they are trying to serve God. You cannot lock them up because of this. He took a very strong stand. Prabhupada liked him a lot. He was actually showing quite some sympathy towards him. And then everything changed. So when it comes to this, then there's no compromise. But why to be so shady and so incredibly illegal if you don't have to? So Denmark is very nice because they're very peaceful circumstances here. It's not in all countries like this. So there are so many things to learn from Prabhupada. His preaching policies, his way to, that should be the objective of our studies. How much Prabhupada warned devotees ahead. He was always ahead. Like he wrote in the times where practically it was impossible to practice Krishna consciousness outside of the temple. Everybody was in the temple. ISKCON means that you live in a temple. There was, in each single of these big temples was around 350 to 400 devotees living in the temple. And outside there like a communities. Prabhupada said, no, we cannot expect everybody living in a temple. There will be people living outside and practicing Krishna consciousness as well. which started to happen quite soon because they would start to get married and moving out, which was those days considered like a fall down. It's actually cynical because it's obvious that the temples cannot sustain, Even here, there's no way a temple can sustain some grihastha. Really, it was proven, it was tried. I won't go into detail, but it's obviously not possible. It's not a duty of a temple. Prabhupada said it can be done under very, very minimalistic circumstances, but he said this grihastha has to be very austere. And it was tried in the beginning, even the children, it never worked. There is no... Therefore Prabhupada advocated farming communities. That's what he actually wanted grihasthas to aim for. Much of the disastrous situations amongst grihasthas come simply from the fact that they are living in a very dangerous environment. They are not bad or something like this, it's just they are very endangered. I mean, you go every day and work with these karmis and then you bring it home and then comes the education and the children go out and they bring it from the school and what do you do with that? How do you sustain some Krishna conscious standards? I tried once, even to create a whole grihastha community. We spent hundreds of thousands of krona. I was quite a rich man at a certain point. So I put all the money into preaching and starting a Krishna conscious community. I started a restaurant in Prague. I got 2-3 families together. I gave them money so they can buy houses. In a small village we created a community. Partially also because I didn't want my daughter to grow up just somewhere between the karmic kids. But then it started. Like one of the elements of destructive to grihastha communities that you have more children as you can handle. Children can destroy everything. They just, because they are just central beings. If you don't have a system how to educate them, how to guard the whole thing, Then the men worked like mad, and this was a very honorable work they had. They had a Hare Krishna restaurant, but 50 kilometers away. They could hardly come home. Suddenly I didn't have one child. I had 7 children more. Because they never saw the father, just on a weekend for a few hours, but I was the only one who was around. So they stuck to me. So I had 6, 7 children around me all the time. They were living in our house and they were just, and they were sleeping in our house too. I never knew who was sleeping in the house. Sometimes there was 3 of them in a room, sometimes there was 5 of them. They didn't want to go home, which was just across the street. But no, they just want to be together and have some fun, So I spent nights with this, just reading stories and painting comics, and they found out I can make a whole thing for them, and I started to produce miniature Krishna, like children books with Krishna in it, because, mixing it up with the other stories and mutated the whole thing, and I was used to talk to you about this, but you think it's like stories from another world. But such a world does exist. It's called outside of the temple. Believe it or not, this is a very exclusive and very closed-up environment you are living in. I wouldn't call it even normal. The majority of human beings are not living like that. This is like a little bubble you are living in here. There is much more out there. I remember this really inspiring letter. One